Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the sands of ancient Egypt, where the sun never seems to set, the Nile flows like an endless ribbon of life, and somewhere behind the golden walls of the Pharaoh's palace, someone is holding a toothpick. No, really, a gold one. You're not a general or a high priest. You're not even the guy who gets to feed sacred cats. You, lucky soul, are the Pharaoh's royal toothpicker. That's right. Your full-time job, your reason for waking up each day, is to keep the most powerful mouth in the ancient world sparkling clean. And believe it or not, that comes with prestige, paranoia, and more papyrus forms than you ever imagined. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't remember signing up for this. One day, you're just a teenager in the spice stalls near the Theban market, chewing a sprig of mint and trying to flirt with the baker's daughter. The next, you're being marched into the palace by two men in leopard skin sashes, and someone's whispering that you've got exceptional manual dexterity. Apparently, someone noticed your hands. Soft, steady, and most importantly, clean. You once made a perfect scarab beetle out of date paste. That caught the attention of a court official's cousin, and, well, that's all it takes sometimes. Congratulations, they tell you. You're going to work in the palace. You imagine bronze weapons, silk curtains, chariots. But then they hand you a box. It's velvet-lined, and inside, gleaming like a tiny sun, is a golden toothpick engraved with the Pharaoh's name. You glance up. Surely this is a joke. Don't drop it, they say, and suddenly the room feels smaller. Your training lasts 6 days. You learn how to kneel correctly, how to bow without moving too quickly, how to hold the gold toothpick at a 45-degree angle so the Pharaoh's royal gums remain undisturbed. You are introduced to the court dentist, who only visits twice a year and smells faintly of vinegar. He tells you, with great solemnity, that dental hygiene is sacred, that plaque invites decay, decay invites bad breath, and bad breath can enrage the gods. You nod. On the 7th day you meet the Pharaoh. He's taller than you expected, older too, but there's something eternal about his face, like it's carved from limestone. He reclines on a low couch surrounded by lilies holding a fan made of ostrich feathers. His mouth opens. A servant rings a tiny bell. It's your moment. You step forward, kneel, and reach for the divine molars. They gleam with resin and honey stains and what might be leftover duck. Your hand does not shake. You will be immensely proud of this later. The toothpick glides in, removing what looks like pomegranate skin. There is silence. Then the Pharaoh sighs. A pleased, half-lidded sigh. You may stay, he says. And just like that, your career begins. Let's pause for a second. You'd think being the Pharaoh's toothpicker would be a joke job, like the royal feather duster or the high priest of sand removal. But here's the thing. Ancient Egyptians took oral hygiene very seriously. They had toothpaste made of rock salt and dried flowers. They chewed on twigs from aromatic bushes to clean their teeth. In fact, archaeologists have found dental tools buried in tombs next to jewelry and sacred texts. Your job might sound ridiculous now, but back then it meant proximity. You were close to power. Every day you knelt within biting distance of a living god. You heard whispers before they became edicts, and if you were careful, if you kept your head down and your gold pick steady, you could live a long, uneventful life with access to palace food and first dibs on second-hand linen, but only if you didn't mess up, because one wrong scratch on the Pharaoh's gum, that's treason flavored with tartar. Your room in the palace is small but breezy. You share a corner of the western servant wing with a man who oils the Pharaoh's sandals and another who is in charge of adjusting pillows for neck divinity. They snore. You're given a schedule written in neat red ink. Dawn, polishing pick. Morning ritual, first clean. Midday, inspection. Evening meal, secondary floss, if required. Dusk, polishing pick again. Night, report to scribe of oral matters. That last guy is the worst. He makes you account for every tooth you inspected. He once fined you 2 drachmas for failure to record molar sensitivity. But the pay is good. You get extra figs. Your tunic is new, and sometimes when you pass the pool where royal wives bathe under moonlight, they look at you like you might be something important. One even winked. You waved back and nearly dropped the pick in the water. There are rules, of course, so many rules. You must not look the Pharaoh in the eye unless spoken to. You must not speak unless spoken to. You must not clean any other teeth except his. Not even your own, technically, though everyone cheats that one. You must not talk to cats unless they talk first. That rule is ambiguous. Most importantly, you must not allow the pick to touch the ground, ever. One day, the junior towel boy sneezes near your hand. You flinch, the pick tilts, it bounces off your palm and lands softly in a pile of lotus petals. The room freezes. 3 guards draw their blades. You freeze harder. A priest steps forward, inspects the petals, and declares that the pick was caught by purity. Everyone relaxes. You dry heave into a vase. That night, you polish the toothpick for 2 hours straight. You consider naming it. Maybe Stabby. You don't. But you do begin to whisper to it when no one's around. You tell it secrets, like how your foot always falls asleep when kneeling, or how the Pharaoh has one slightly crooked canine. You don't tell anyone else. That's your secret. Historians still argue whether the position of royal toothpicker was ceremonial or functional. Some claim it was just a fancy title for a more general hygiene role. Others believe you really did spend your days poking food out of sacred teeth. You know the truth? It's both. Some days, the Pharaoh actually wants you to clean his teeth. Other days, he uses you to signal favor. If he calls you during a meeting, it means he's bored. If he dismisses you with a flick, he's annoyed. Once, he summoned you 3 times in 1 hour just to mess with a foreign diplomat. See, he said to the man, my servant ensures I do not spit when I speak. Can you guarantee such things in your own court? The diplomat blinked. You grinned, very slightly. He did not return. You start to notice the patterns. The Pharaoh eats more goose after arguments with the vizier. He chews harder on days when storms are coming. He favors the left side of his mouth when he's planning something military. You begin to feel like part of the rhythm, like a dental sundial. But there's always that tension, the hush when you enter, the fact that you kneel, that your eyes are always averted, that you are still, at the end of the day, a servant who handles gold near a royal throat. There's one moment, only once, when you catch him watching you. Not angry, not amused, just curious. Do you ever want more? He asks suddenly. Your hand pauses. No, divine one, you answer. He nods. The next day he gives you a bracelet made of blue faience and lapis lazuli. It's shaped like a tooth. You wear it only at night. And that, dear listener, is how your long, uneventful life begins. Not with glory, not with war, but with plaque. You may not be the most powerful person in Egypt. You may not even be the 10th most important. But you're there, every day, in the shadows of the throne, with your steady hands and your tiny golden tool, removing the seeds and silence from a god's smile. And somehow, that's enough. You wake before the sun. The palace isn't loud yet, just the slow scuff of sandals, the hush of linen against sandstone, and the distant gurgle of someone starting their morning prayers near the garden fountain. You sit upright on your mat, stretch your arms toward the faded ceiling, and stare at your hands. Still steady, still soft. Good. You wiggle your fingers and give them a little motivational pep talk. These 10 digits, after all, are your career. You stand, dust your knees, and begin the routine. Because every single day of your life as the Pharaoh's royal toothpicker starts with precision, discipline, and a baffling amount of mint oil. The pick must be cleaned, not just rinsed. Oh no, that would be blasphemy. It must be immersed in a mix of crushed myrrh, lotus water, and sea salt. You hold the golden toothpick like a priest holds a relic, swirling it through the tiny ceramic bowl until it shines. Then it's time for your own mouth. 2 rinses, 1 chew stick, a dab of frankincense paste, and a final gargle that tastes like licorice and regret. The Pharaoh's breath must never smell less fresh than yours. By the time the sun begins bleeding over the sandstone towers, you're dressed in fresh linen, your feet are sandaled, and your appointment log is already being scratched out by the scribe of oral matters. Inspection today, he grumbles, scribbling furiously with his reed pen. 1 tooth of concern, premolar, left side, possible softness. You nod. You pretend to care. You do not care. But the scribe insists. He always insists. He has 3 obsessions: dental decay, minor gods of irrigation, and the proper stacking order of papyrus scrolls. He once chased you through the hallway because you placed the moisture and molar integrity report beneath the royal rinse supply list. To this day, he has not forgiven you. Still, you thank him with an over-polished bow and head off down the hall. The morning ritual begins soon, and you have approximately 11 minutes to make it to the outer antechamber before the royal tongue emerges like a cobra from behind beaded curtains. The palace is never truly quiet. It hums. Even before the day begins, it's alive with the rustle of feet, the creak of papyrus sandals, the whisper of distant drums, the soft gurgle of sacred fish ponds. You pass the harpist tuning strings near the queen's quarters. He doesn't see you. He's too busy adjusting his posture for maximum mystical resonance. You pass the perfume bearers. They nod. You nod back. You are all part of the machine now. Inside the palace walls, there are over 400 full-time staff, not counting the cat herders, food tasters, and the people who wash the statues with imported goat milk. Every job is weird. Yours just happens to be extra specific. You arrive exactly 30 seconds early. Perfect. The Pharaoh is already reclining on his morning throne, draped in thin white linen, one elbow propped lazily on a plush armrest that probably cost more than your house. His eyelids flutter as priests chant in the corner, and an incense cone smolders on a golden dish beside him. He sees you. He nods. You step forward. Proceed, he murmurs. You kneel. You lift the golden pick. And as your hand nears his mouth, time does what it always does during these moments. It stretches. You hear the drip of water from the nearby fountain. You notice the fly hovering near a bowl of dates. You feel the weight of every other person in the room holding their breath. You scrape gently along the gum line. The Pharaoh grunts. You retreat. You missed a bit. he says, amused. You step forward again. More scraping. Then it's over. 2 minutes, tops, and you've once again averted national disaster by preventing a seed from getting lodged in a molar. The day can now begin. You file your report. Yes, there are reports. Every procedure, no matter how brief, is documented. The location of the pick, the angle, the material was removed, color, texture, quantity, the Pharaoh's reaction, any unusual gum sounds. It all goes into the royal dental log, stored under lock and key near the temple archives. Historians still argue whether these records were used for medical tracking or divine prophecy. Some believe the Pharaoh's mouth was considered a miniature map of the cosmos, with each tooth representing a different celestial god. Others think the court dentist was just very bored. Your theory? Bureaucracy. Ancient Egypt loved paperwork like cats love knocking things off ledges, and the scribe of oral matters is practically purring. Once the report is signed and sealed, with wax bearing a tiny molar, you're free until midday. What do you do at that time? Not much. Palace life, despite its grandeur, is slow. You walk past the mural room and trace your fingers along the painted walls, admiring the scenes of crocodiles and boats. You sip barley water. You watch 2 young priests arguing over which bird entrails predict drought more accurately. You consider taking a nap, but remember that last time you did that, you missed a sandal oiling ceremony and were nearly reassigned to latrine scribe. So instead, you sit on a stone bench and breathe. And it hits you. This is it. This is your life now. No more street markets. No more mint for fun. Just service. Reports. The endless orbit of the royal molars. And weirdly, it's kind of peaceful. Around you, life in the palace flows like honey down a hot plate. In the great hall, the vizier is lecturing junior officials on taxation quotas. Someone accidentally knocks over a bowl of dates. A scribe gasps. A guard rolls his eyes. In the courtyard, a sacred ibis hops in circles near the reflecting pool. 2 laundry boys are playing a dangerous game involving a wet linen sheet and a very annoyed cat. Meanwhile, you're in the shade of a date palm, reviewing your notes for this afternoon's tooth softness evaluation. You've learned to spot the signs. Slight hesitations during chewing, an odd hum after the 3rd swallow, or that one time the Pharaoh refused roasted almonds, and everyone assumed he was cursed. Turned out he had a cracked molar. You diagnosed it. You were congratulated. A priest wrote a hymn about your golden vigilance. They performed it once. It was tuneless. Still, you felt proud. Later, as the sun reaches its peak and the stone walls start radiating heat like they're angry at you personally, it's time for the midday inspection. The Pharaoh has just finished eating. Goose again. The smell still lingers in the air, sweet, smoky, with a faint tinge of cumin. You kneel beside his couch. "Report," he says, between swigs of wine. You murmur your findings. He nods, lifts his chin. You inspect. There it is. Premolar, left side. Softness confirmed. You prod gently with the side of the pick, then dab a tiny amount of cedar resin. It should help until the next visit from the actual dentist, who only comes on the 3rd lunar day after the flood festivals, unless it's a year of double moons, in which case, never mind. You finish, bow, and step back. The Pharaoh yawns. You're very quiet, he says suddenly. You freeze. He's looking at you. Perhaps, he continues, you have nothing interesting to say, or perhaps you know too much. You gulp. He smiles, that slow, dangerous smile that royalty practices in mirrors. Then he waves you off. Your heart doesn't stop hammering for several minutes. The rest of the afternoon drips by in humid silence. You pass time sharpening the tip of your toothpick with a cloth made from retired priest robes. Blessed thread, allegedly. It smells like cinnamon and goat. You write in your private scroll, a diary of sorts. Not that you can ever let anyone see it. If anyone found out you gave the Pharaoh's teeth nicknames, you'd be thrown into the sacred crocodile pond. But still, it helps. Canine Carter seems sharper today, possibly suspicious. Watch Molar, Michael. You close it, tuck it under your mat, and pretend you're not the weirdest person in the palace. Spoiler, you absolutely are. That night, at the evening meal, you're called again. Just a quick check, the steward says. The Pharaoh ate honeyed locusts. You don't even blink anymore. You scrape, swab, and dab. Then you notice a tiny red spot on the gum line. You pause. Just a burst capillary, no swelling, no odor. Probably from crunching too hard. You note it down, and as you do, you realize you've learned the patterns of his mouth better than your own. You could map his molars blindfolded. You dream in enamel. This should concern you. It doesn't. Back in your room, you collapse onto your mat. Your roommate is snoring again, loudly. You stuff linen into your ears and stare at the ceiling. And you wonder, just briefly, what your life might have looked like if you hadn't sculpted that stupid beetle out of date paste. Would you have married the baker's daughter? Opened a perfume stall? Become one of those guys who balances baskets on their head while singing off-key? But no. Here you are, polishing plaque for a living god. You drift off to sleep to the faint scent of goose fat and mint. And somewhere, in a different wing of the palace, a guard steps on a cat and sets off a chain of events that will eventually lead to you being reassigned for a week to pigeon duty. But that, dear listener, is a story for another night. The next morning, you're summoned by a messenger who is either half asleep or just fully disappointed in life. He hands you a reed scroll tied with a ribbon that smells faintly of crushed figs. His radiance requests your presence, he mutters, at the house of divine hygiene immediately. You blink. What now? He just shrugs, mutters something about tongue blessings, and trudges off. You unfold the scroll. It's real, royal seal and everything. You've been summoned, not by the Pharaoh himself, technically, but by the high priest of oral sanctity. A man known throughout the palace by a title you genuinely wish was a joke. Warden of the Gums. By mid-morning, you're trotting behind a camel cart loaded with ceremonial rinses, trying to stay out of the sun. The House of Divine Hygiene is located just outside the palace's main northern wall, nestled between the Temple of Bastet and the Royal Garden for Mysterious Herbs, red, palace-approved narcotics. It's not large, it's not grand. In fact, it looks a bit like someone stacked 3 oversized clay jars and called it architecture. But it's clean, frighteningly clean. The walls gleam white in the sun. Someone has carved dozens of molars into the plaster, smiling down at you like ivory guardians. You're greeted by a novice acolyte whose breath smells aggressively like clove. "Please remove your sandals," he says, bowing low. "Shoes offend the floor gods." You look down. The tiles are shaped like tongues. You consider turning back. You don't. Inside it's cooler, quiet, almost unnaturally so. The floor doesn't echo and the walls are lined with what you can only describe as altars. Each one holds a tooth, some real, some carved, resting on velvet cushions. The air smells of sage, mint, and slightly panicked reverence. You're ushered through a series of hallways, past paintings of deities brushing their teeth with reeds, and one bizarre mural where Anubis is apparently giving someone a fluoride treatment. Your guide does not explain. You're finally brought to a round chamber where a man in thick gold robes stands facing a massive statue of a yawning lion. The lion has perfect teeth. "You are the royal Toothpicker?" he asks without turning. "I am," you reply. He spins dramatically. His robe catches on a nearby brazier and briefly starts to smoke. No one reacts. He swats it out with the dignity of a man who's caught fire before. "I am High Priest Henu," he intones, "Warden of the Gums, Keeper of the Breath, Defender of the Tongue." You nod slowly. "Of course." He gestures for you to sit on a cushion shaped like a bicuspid. You do, trying not to sink too far into the stuffing. "We have concerns," he says, eyes narrowing. The Pharaoh's dental aura has fluctuated. You raise an eyebrow. "We conducted a breath reading at dawn," he continued. "The incense fog lingered longer than usual. That is a sign. A sign of imbalance, possibly pre-decay." You fight the urge to explain the Pharaoh had honeyed figs and grilled onions last night. Instead, you nod solemnly. "May I ask how you plan to treat this imbalance?" He claps twice. A young girl enters, carrying a tray of carved stone tongue scrapers, each inscribed with hieroglyphs. She sets them down, bows, and backs out. "With ritual, of course," he replies. "You, Royal Toothpicker, will lead the purification rite." You freeze. "I will." He nods gravely. "You must anoint the pick of Maat." You're taken to a locked chamber guarded by two stern-faced women who absolutely do not blink. Inside is a stone pedestal. On it lies the pick of Maat, a ceremonial toothpick the length of your forearm, made of gold, ivory, lapis lazuli, and possibly ego. It gleams in the low light, radiating authority and dental judgment. "No mortal has wielded this pick in 50 years, says High Priest Henu. "The last one developed a squeaky wrist and was exiled to the fish-drying fields." You approach it slowly. It's heavier than it looks. You lift it, nod respectfully, and ask the only question that matters. "Do I actually use this?" "Of course not," Henu snorts. "It's symbolic. You wave it around, chant a bit. The gums will be pleased." The ritual takes place in the courtyard of cleansing, in front of a small but extremely serious crowd. A few priests, a baker who accidentally wandered in, and the vizier's third cousin who thinks he's cursed and shows up to every blessing just in case. You are given a scroll of incantations. Most of them involve commanding a plaque to flee. One of them contains the phrase, "May the tartar crumble like sand before Ra." You read it aloud with the dignity of a man who flosses hourly. Then you wave the pick of Maat in slow, sweeping arcs, trying not to let the weight drag your arm out of socket. The crowd murmurs approvingly. Someone in the back starts humming. A priest begins rhythmically shaking a pouch of fennel seeds. The ceremony lasts exactly 23 minutes. At the end, Henu anoints your forehead with a paste that smells like ancient spinach and mutters, "May the breath remain sweet." You have officially been absorbed into the sacred order of the molar. As you're escorted back through the temple's exit corridor, lined with warning murals of demons carrying decayed teeth, Henu leans close and whispers, "We are watching." Then he gives you a surprisingly cheerful wink and vanishes through a curtain. You step outside into the blinding sun, blinking and slightly minty. "Well," you mutter to yourself, That was normal. You're halfway back to the palace when a bird poops directly onto your shoulder. You sigh. Apparently, not even the gods of gingivitis can stop a pigeon with bad aim. Back at the palace, word has already spread. You walk through the halls and people nod with the exaggerated reverence usually reserved for astrologers or people who can juggle flaming bowls. "You led the gum right," one servant says in awe. "You touched the pick," whispers a perfume girl. "I heard you summoned Ma'at herself using cinnamon mist," says a guard. Absolutely incorrect. You consider correcting him. You don't. The new reputation comes with perks. That evening, your dinner is served with extra honey. You get an upgraded pillow. A junior priest offers to oil your sandals. Downside? The scribe of oral matters is now mad at you for bypassing his standard molar paperwork protocol. He leaves you a note written entirely in red ink, which, in palace terms, is one step below actual attempted murder. You ignore it. You're floating too high on ceremonial adrenaline. That night, as you lie on your mat, arms behind your head, you reflect on how surreal your life has become. 2 months ago, you were an apprentice perfume mixer with a dream of retiring early and a mild fear of camels. Now you're the Pharaoh's private toothpicker, the ceremonial wielder of the Pick of Ma'at, and possibly the subject of an upcoming hymn cycle. Historians still argue whether the House of Divine Hygiene was a legitimate medical temple or just another example of spiritual overreach in ancient bureaucracy. One theory claims it was founded after a pharaoh choked on a prune pit and declared molar care to be sacred. Another suggests it was a cover operation for something far more political, like elite tongue reading to detect traitors. But whatever its origin, the house is real. And now, it's watching you. The Pharaoh is not in a good mood. You know this because the entire palace is walking on reeds, not eggs. Eggs would be too loud. Servants whisper, courtiers tiptoe. Even the royal geese have been temporarily relocated for being emotionally disruptive. The cause? A small brown spot, not on the Pharaoh's robe, not on his sandals, but on his upper left canine. You first notice it during the mid-morning pick. You've grown used to your royal routine: kneel, swab, rinse, inspect. But today, as you lean in with your soft linen pad, you pause. There it is, tiny, faint. But it's there, like a rebellious dot of insult just sitting there on his royal enamel. The Pharaoh notices your hesitation. His eyes narrow. "What is it?" he asks. You straighten, trying to play it cool. "Just a bit of fig stain, your radiance." He nods. But then, perhaps out of sheer paranoia, he signals to his personal mirror bearer. A polished copper slab is held up. The Pharaoh inspects. He frowns. "That is not fig." You're ordered to step back. A trio of high-ranking priests is summoned. Then the court physician. Then, somehow, the vizier. Within the hour, 11 people are standing around the throne debating whether the brown dot is a stain, a cavity, or an omen from Set, god of chaos and dessert-related injuries. You, of course, are blamed. You're not directly accused. Nobody wants to offend the man who once waved the pick of Ma'at, but the implication hangs in the air like sandalwood mist. You should have noticed sooner. You should have warned them. You should have ritually flossed. Historians still argue whether this moment marked the beginning of formal dental accountability. You think, as you're quietly moved from your comfortable chamber to a much smaller one near the pigeon coop. A full crisis council is called. It includes the high priest of oral sanctity, a visiting Nubian scholar with 3 teeth of his own, and a woman known only as Madame Past, who sells herbal goop in the southern market. You are not invited to speak, but you are required to stand nearby and nod when appropriate. Madame Past suggests applying a poultice made of mashed dates, myrrh, and powdered camel hoof. The Nubian scholar proposes tooth painting to match the color of the healthy side. The vizier wonders if the brown mark is actually a sign that the pharaoh is evolving into a more powerful god form. You want to suggest gentle scraping and maybe some vinegar rinses, but no one asks. Eventually, the pharaoh himself says, "I wish to cleanse the spot." Everyone bows. The warden of the gums mutters something about plaque purification rites. You are ordered to prepare the ceremonial tooth bath. The next day, you are dressed in fresh linen and handed a brush woven from palm fibers and rabbit hair. The pharaoh reclines on a marble chaise, mouth open like a yawning crocodile. You dip your brush in warm oil infused with mint and honey. Gently, you begin the brushing ritual. For all the court drama, the actual work is delicate and quiet. You hum softly, you lean close, you scrub. The brown spot is stubborn. It stares back at you like a sarcastic grain of sand. After 20 minutes, the pharaoh raises a hand. "That is enough." You stop. The spot is still there, perhaps slightly paler, perhaps not. The pharaoh frowns. The crowd signs. Then, the real disaster. 3 days later, word leaks. Some palace scribe mentions it to a cousin, but the cousin mentions it to a fish seller. By market day, the entire city is buzzing. The pharaoh's tooth is decaying. He is mortal. He is flawed. He is, gasp, not divinely smooth of mouth. Pamphlets are etched into clay and left at shrine steps. A particularly bold mural appears in the potter's quarter, depicting the pharaoh with a gaping brown crater in place of a mouth. You pass it one morning on your way to buy pickling spices. It's unflattering, to say the least. The teeth are exaggerated, the spot has grown to engulf half the face, and a tiny cartoon stands beneath it, weeping. You sigh. Back at the palace, paranoia blooms. If the pharaoh's teeth can decay, what else is rotting? Rebellion? Disease? A famine of figs? One general claims it's a divine warning and recommends sacrificing 300 goats. Someone else suggests outlawing raisins. You find yourself summoned again and again, not to clean teeth, but to reassure nervous advisors that no new spots have appeared. You become the kingdom's official enamel observer. You start giving weekly reports. They're not exciting. The left canine remains unchanged. Incisor number 2 appears healthy, with a slight tartar near the gum line. Back molars undisturbed, though subject claims mild twinge during honey chewing. You learn to measure each tooth in terms of glow and resistance. You become fluent in terms like pre-shadowing, oral vitality, and salivary humors. At one point, a paranoid priest insists on measuring the angles of the pharaoh's bite to confirm he's still aligned with the cosmic chewing axis. You just nod. Oddly, your role expands. You're invited to oversee the annual harvest feast to ensure none of the offerings are molar risks. You are asked to bless honey dates before banquets. You're consulted on wedding cakes. You are now, effectively, Minister of Chew. You try to enjoy the influence, but there's tension in the air. Every day someone new tries to fix the spot. Herbalists, dancers. One guy who brought in a snake and claimed it would lick the evil away. None succeed. Eventually the pharaoh, frustrated, tired, slightly less shiny, calls you to his private chambers. "Be honest," he says. What do I do? You weigh your answer carefully. Then you say the boldest thing you've ever said in your life. Live with it. He stares at you. You do not flinch. He looks away, sighs, and mutters, "That's the most honest answer I've heard in weeks." You're dismissed, but not punished. That night, a new mural appeared in the palace kitchen. It shows the Pharaoh standing proud, the brown spot now depicted as a radiant sunburst. Below him, a tiny you is kneeling, holding a toothbrush like a scepter. Your reputation soars. Historians still argue whether this spot really existed or whether it was exaggerated by later scribes to explain a sudden religious shift. Some believe it marked the beginning of humanizing pharaohs in art. Others claim it was the work of a rival dentist cult trying to undermine the temple priests. One tablet from the era simply reads, "The mouth knows the truth." No one knows what that means, but they quote it often. Your own days settle into something calm again. The crisis, somehow, has passed. The Pharaoh smiles more. Occasionally you catch him touching the spot gently with his tongue, not out of worry anymore, just curiosity. You resume your work. You pick, you brush, you clean, and somewhere deep inside you realize the truth. Even the gods get cavities. If the brown spot was a storm cloud over your head, the next event is the thunderclap that follows it, loud, silly, and somehow ceremonial. It begins, as so many absurdities do, with the high vizier announcing a festival. The Pharaoh's mouth, he proclaims, is a national treasure, and a treasure must be celebrated. And just like that, the first ever festival of royal hygiene was born. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. The idea starts simple enough: offerings to the gods for continued oral vitality, free pomegranate for the poor, and maybe a few hymns to soothe the Pharaoh's enamel. But it spirals quickly. By day 3 of planning, the festival now includes a tooth-shaped float made of papyrus and honeycomb, an interpretive dance called the Gums Rejoice, and worst of all, a toothpick pageant. Yes, a pageant, a contest where local mouth artisans present their finest tools to the court in hopes of being named the supreme toothpicker of the Nile. You blink, unsure if this is a dream or a divine prank. But no, it's real. You, the Pharaoh's actual appointed pick of Ma'at, are now expected to compete. Against a sandal merchant from Abydos, a 13-year-old girl who carves date pits, and a man named Yoru the Tusk Tamer, who wears boar teeth as earrings and only speaks in grunts. You're doomed. The festival begins with much fanfare. Palm fronds wave, lyres play. A group of shirtless dancers smeared in mint paste leap through hoops while chanting, "White as Ra's light, strong as Horus's bite." You try not to make eye contact with anyone. The Pharaoh sits on a raised platform under a canopy of fig leaves. He's dressed entirely in white with gold threads stitched in the shape of molars. You stand off to the side in your ceremonial linen, freshly washed, but definitely not pageant-level glam. Your first competitor, the sandal merchant, steps forward. He presents his invention, the dual-end scaler, a stick with a soft brush on one end and a carved scarab on the other. He claims the scarab vibrates in the mouth, like the holy beetle of Osiris scurrying away disease. The crowd claps. You resist the urge to squint suspiciously. The scarab wobbles, but mostly because it's poorly glued. Next up, the 13-year-old prodigy. She bows low and shows her tiny, intricately carved toothpick shaped like a lotus blossom. It's charming, delicate, slightly absurd. The Pharaoh smiles. Then comes Yoru. He walks slowly, head high, bare chest glistening with crocodile oil. In his hands, a chunk of bone, unshaped, unsharpened, just raw, primal tusk. He lifts it to his mouth, opens wide, and crunch, gnaws a groove straight down the middle with his molars. The crowd gasps. Even the royal geese stop honking. Yoru turns, roars, and raises the chunk of bone to the sky like it's the moon tooth of Ra himself. The judges applaud wildly. You're next. You step forward quietly. In your hands is your tool, not flashy, not bone-chillingly primal, but well-crafted. It's made of polished acacia wood, gently curved, soaked in mint oil, and tipped with a tuft of ibex hair bound in beeswax. You say nothing. You kneel, just as you do every morning, and clean a volunteer's teeth, an old guard named Baku who's eaten too many dried plums this week. You work with precision, patience, rhythm. The crowd falls still. There is something about watching you work that humbles them. It's not a spectacle, it's a ritual, service, time-honed care. When you finish, the Pharaoh leans forward. His gums don't bleed, he says. The High Vizier nods solemnly. A few people clap politely. You return to your place. The results are underwhelming. The judges announce a three-way tie between the girl, the sandal merchant, and Yoru. You, honorary royal artisan, which is like being voted most likely to floss in a school where no one flosses. You're asked to pose for a bas relief with the winners. Yoru puts his tusk bone in your face and grins. You fake a smile. The girl tugs your sleeve and whispers, "You're still the best, you know." You sigh. Later that night, there's a feast under the stars. The Pharaoh is in a good mood again. He's had 6 honeyed locusts and is currently testing how loudly he can crunch a roasted almond. You're seated near the dais, chewing on a date and watching sparks fly from the fire dancers. Suddenly, Yoru appears beside you. He sits, grunts, and places his tusk-bone toothpick in your lap. "Yours is better," he says, voice rough like sandstone. Then he leaves. You stare at the tusk, then back at your own humble tool. The two couldn't be more different. And yet, here you are, still the one cleaning the Pharaoh's teeth each morning, still the one who knows every ridge and groove in the royal mouth, still the one trusted with the one tool that matters. Historians still argue whether the Festival of Royal Hygiene was meant as a satire, a power play by the vizier to embarrass rising court servants, or simply a misguided attempt to boost public morale after the brown spot debacle. One surviving hymn includes the line, "Bless the one who polishes with no crown. His pick is quiet, but his art is gold." That's probably about you. You think about that as you fall asleep that night, tusk-bone beside you, the moon overhead shaped suspiciously like an incisor. And in the morning, you'll do it all again. Pick, brush, rinse, smile. The Pharaoh is furious. You know this instantly, not because of shouting, he rarely shouts, or the clatter of thrown pottery, though that did happen once over a misfiled lentil invoice, but because his chewing has changed. You can hear it. Instead of the slow, steady rhythm of a man savoring imported almonds, today he grinds like a jackal on bricks. Something is wrong. You're summoned at dawn. No ceremony, no linen robes, no honey water, just a panicked steward shaking you awake with the breath of a man who's never met mint. "They want your expertise," he hisses. "It's urgent." You stumble into your sandals, grab your pick instinctively, and jog the palace corridors barefoot, passing yawning guards and sleepy scribes. Then you see it. Not the Pharaoh, he's still behind the veil of royal privacy, but the victim, a servant, young, pale, shaking, and right there on the side of his neck, a bite mark, not a scratch, not a peck, not a love nibble under a torchlight. An unmistakable, full-mouthed, jaw-clenched bite. 2 rows of tooth impressions, almost artistic in their clarity. You know teeth. You know mouths. And you know. This wasn't from a dog. The chamber's full. Advisors, priests, the vizier. Even Madame Past has returned, now rebranded as High Oracle of the Mandible. All eyes turn to you as you approach. Well, someone asks, what do you call the royal tooth? You step closer to the servant. He trembles as you gently tilt his head to study the wound. It's deep, brutal, but oddly clean. Upper incisors, narrow, lower teeth, slightly crooked. You lean back. This bite is human. Gasps, real ones. Someone drops a goblet. Human? The vizier growls. Then who among us has turned feral? The room turns to the Pharaoh's elite guards. One looks insulted. I've only bitten apples this week, he hisses. The Pharaoh steps forward from behind a veil of gold-threaded curtains. He looks pale, sleepless. This happened near my private garden, he says quietly. I want to know who dared attack one of mine using their mouth. You bow deeply, then rise. I will need tooth access. And just like that, you become the first official dental inquisitor in the palace's history. A new title, sure, but the work, not glamorous. You spend the next 3 days prying your jaws open. Servants, scribes, guards, nobles, even the goose handlers. Open wide, you say for the 100th time as a courtier flinches. You compare each bite pattern using a damp clay slab you had specially made. Press, lift, compare, repeat. One noble tries to bribe you with dates. Another weeps and says biting is part of her meditation practice. You discover several things. Lord Attenham has 3 extra molars. The head cook is missing his front tooth entirely, thanks to a chickpea incident. And a surprising number of people have very sharp canines. But none match the bite mark. None. Then something strange. Late at night, as you review your clay imprints under lamplight, you notice something. One bite from your collection isn't from the current round of suspects. It's older, from your brown spot days, from the Pharaoh himself. You hold it beside the neck impression you traced earlier. You squint, and your heart skips. The spacing, the arc, the slight tilt of the upper right incisor. It's nearly identical. No, that's impossible. You check again. Still a match. You sit back, hands sweating. Did the Pharaoh? No, surely not. He's a god king. He recites poetry. He wears imported leopard sandals. He once cried over a turtle with a cracked shell. But still, you've seen him grind his teeth during council meetings. You've seen him chew through his fig pit when annoyed. And the victim was a servant from his garden, yes? The thought hovers over you all night. When morning comes, you request a private audience. To your surprise, the Pharaoh agrees. His chamber smells of myrrh and quiet fury. He waves off attendants and gestures for you to speak. You bow, then quietly lay out the clay mold, then the tracing of the wound, then his own bite impression. He studies them in silence. Then, unexpectedly, he laughs. You think I bit him? You say nothing. He picks up the clay mold, smiles grimly. I did, he says. Your heart skips again. It was a misunderstanding. A what? He sighs. I was fasting, meditating, deep in prayer. The boy startled me while I was half asleep on the garden bench. I thought he was a jackal. I lashed out. He sets down the clay. I apologized, of course, but the story spread faster than honey on papyrus. You exhale slowly. But why the secrecy? He shrugs. I didn't want to seem unstable. Not after the spot. Not after the pageant. Fair enough. You nod. He smiles. Destroy the mold. You hesitate. He raises an eyebrow. You nod again, pick up the clay, and smash it on the floor with a satisfying crunch. Later, the Pharaoh makes a public announcement. He blames the bite on an evil spirit that briefly possessed a loyal servant. The court applauds his courage for overcoming dark forces with sheer dental purity. You stand in the background, mouth firmly shut. Historians still argue about the bite. Some say it was symbolic, a staged act to humble the court. Others claim it was a test of loyalty for the palace staff. A few fringe thinkers believe the Pharaoh had developed a predatory form of stress chewing. One particularly bold scribe wrote, "In the land of the gods, even teeth may rebel." No one knows what happened to him, but his ink was lovely. The bite mark scandal fades as all things do. You return to your quiet corner of court life. You clean, you swish, you polish. The Pharaoh returns to figs, and you carry a new secret, not written, not carved, just remembered. That even gods, especially gods, have their moments of weakness, and sometimes they bite. The invitation arrives not on parchment, not with wax, not whispered through trembling lips at dawn. It arrives in the form of a carved limestone tablet carried by two temple scribes who refuse to make eye contact with you. You read it aloud. By order of the priesthood of Anubis and in observance of the great refeeding rite, you are hereby summoned to prepare the honored teeth of Lord Nebka III for ceremonial consumption. You blink, you read it again, then you do the only logical thing. You say, "Wait, he's dead, right?" The taller scribe nods solemnly. "Extremely dead," he replies. The following morning, you're packed into a royal chariot with your full kit, 3 jars of incense, and a scroll explaining that this is all very sacred and not at all ridiculous. The temple lies across the river, hidden behind a grove of silent palm trees and a wall carved with stern-faced jackals. As you pass under the stone arch, the air cools by 10 degrees. The torches flicker as if breathing. A low hum rolls through the corridor. You have never, in your entire career of mouthwork, performed on someone whose last meal was during the reign of the previous pharaoh. A priest meets you inside, tall, hooded, smells like old onions. "You are the royal mouthworker," he intones, not a question. You nod. He hands you a pot of resin. The noble Nebka must be prepared to consume the offerings placed before him in the afterlife. His soul will only rest if his mouth is ready to chew the spiritual loaves. You resist asking how long a dead man's soul is expected to keep chewing. Lord Nebka's tomb is magnificent. Gilded columns, paintings of lotus-eating deer, a sarcophagus the size of a small boat. And lying at the center of it all, swaddled in linen and dignity, is Nebka himself. Dry, fragile, radiating the timeless aura of a man who once argued about granary taxes and now dreams in gold. You kneel before the mummy, you unwrap the face, very slowly. The skin, dry as aged papyrus, peels gently to reveal the noble jaw. Surprisingly, he still has most of his teeth. Surprisingly, they're not terrible. You murmur an apology and begin your work. To clean a mummy's teeth, you must think like a ghost. You use tiny brushes made of heron feather. You dab instead of scrape. You avoid aggressive swishing unless you want a mouthful of embalming paste on your sandals. As you work, the priests chant behind you, low, rhythmic, like bees performing funeral poetry. They burn incense. They sprinkle sand. One drops a fig into a bronze bowl and weeps quietly. May his bite be true, the lead priest whispers. You keep brushing. Suddenly, a hand grabs your shoulder. You yelp. It's not the mummy. It's a temple assistant. He's pale. The tongue, he whispers. He must be able to taste the afterlife. You glance back at Nebka. You've never met a more thoroughly deceased tongue. It looks like a dried apricot cursed by the gods. You sigh. Using the gentlest pick in your collection, you clean what's left of his palate. Then, reverently, you touch his gums with a drop of lotus oil. There, you whisper. That's all I can do. The priest nods. Then let the banquet begin. You step back as 12 attendants enter carrying trays. There's everything. Symbolic roast goose, painted clay, symbolic lentil stew, fragrant sand, symbolic beer, actual beer poured ceremonially, and a pyramid of sculpted honey cakes meant to represent 1,000 years of dessert. The offerings are arranged before Nebka. Then, with a theatrical flourish, a priest leans close to the mummy and whispers, "Bite." Nothing happens, of course, but they all sigh with satisfaction. Later, over a real meal, you're served actual lentils and stale bread in the side chamber. One of the junior priests sits beside you. "You did well," he says. "I cleaned a dead man's mouth," you reply. "Exactly," he smiles. "That's the kind of precision we don't see anymore." Historians still argue over the necessity of post-mortem dental care in New Kingdom rituals. Some say it was purely symbolic, a way to reassure the living that the dead could enjoy eternity. Others suggest it had deeper meanings, that the bite, the chew, the ritual digestion of sacred food mirrored the eternal cycle of rebirth. A fringe school insists that one temple in Karnak believed improperly brushed corpses might wake up in the afterlife with embarrassing breath. Your name is never mentioned in the scrolls, but one priest, scribe Penuhotep, sketched a small figure next to Nebka's sarcophagus, holding what appears to be a tiny brush. He captioned it, "The one who dared clean the dead." Nice ring to it. When you return to the palace, no one asks where you've been. The Pharaoh doesn't mention it. The vizier pretends he can't smell embalming resin on your robes. Even Madame Paste gives you a nod of respect when you pass in the hallway. But later that night, the head steward knocks on your door. Wordlessly, he hands you a small parcel. Inside is a necklace, ivory carved in the shape of a molar, old, worn. A note is tied to it. To chew forever, one must first be clean. N. You stare at it for a long time before setting it gently on your shelf beside your tools. That night, your dreams taste like honey cake and dust. And in the distance, someone whispers, "Bite." There's an extra camel outside the palace gate. A big one, over-accessorized. Jewels tied to its reins. It looks smug, somehow, like it knows it belongs to royalty and has never once been asked to carry lentils. You're not supposed to notice camels, but when you see that animal, you know something unusual is about to happen. Sure enough, moments later, the steward finds you in the herb garden where you're grinding mint leaves for your experimental tongue cleanser. Verdict, unpleasantly spicy. You're summoned, he says, sweat glistening. Foreign guests. Urgent. You raise an eyebrow. Tooth emergency? He grimaces. Diplomatic emergency, but yes, also teeth. The grand hall is humming with that tense sort of politeness that usually precedes a formal argument or surprise dowry demand. The Pharaoh sits on his lotus-carved throne, robes glittering faintly. His expression is fixed somewhere between regal curiosity and mild nausea. And there, in the center of the room, is a young man in dark robes, arms folded, face twisted with what can only be described as haughty discomfort. Prince Hattusili, a real breathing Hittite, a minor royal cousin sent from the north to negotiate some not quite urgent, not quite harmless treaty about river reeds, boat tariffs, and regional bragging rights. But that's not the issue. The issue is his molar. More specifically, the fact that it's infected and he won't let anyone touch it. He scowls at you. You are the tooth man? You bow, polite. I have that honor, yes. I do not require your poking sticks, he says. You nod gently. Then perhaps you'll permit one question? He grunts. Which side is it? He hesitates. Left. You nod again. Then you casually say, so why is your right eye twitching? Everyone notices it now. The prince flinches. He rubs his face, then mutters, fine. One look, no touching. You step close. You smell exotic spices on his breath, but also something darker, the sour, iron-like scent of infected gum. You ask him to open his mouth. He hesitates, then does. It's bad, swollen, inflamed, and tucked at the very back is a molar the size of a pebble that's gone the color of storm clouds. You lean back. That tooth, you say gently, and has already died. Gasps ripple through the court. The prince straightens. I'm alive. My tooth serves me. You bow. I mean no insult, but it has passed from this life, and now it haunts your face. A courtier stifles a laugh. The Pharaoh raises a hand for silence. You have two options, you continue. Let me remove it now, or let it fester until your cheek swells like a sun fruit and you start weeping blood. There is a long pause. Then, surprisingly, the prince chuckles. You speak like a priest, he says. You shrug. I've worked on the dead. That does it. Very well, he growls. But you will do it with your fingers, not your poking iron. You nod. You lie. Later, in the quiet of the preparation chamber, you gently press a calming herb between his gums and cheek. Is this poison? He asks, squinting. No, you reply, but you'll wish it were when I start. He chuckles again. You glance at your tools, a thin bronze hook, a wedge, a carved wooden clamp shaped like a sparrow's beak. You won't like any of them, so you do something different. You use silk. Silk woven from palace stock, tied carefully into a loop. You place it around the base of the tooth like a garland. Then, after waiting for the numbing herb to take hold, you pull. Fast. There is a yelp, a splatter of something warm, and a long silence. The prince breathes heavily. You hold up the tooth. It gleams in the torchlight. Ugly, angry, but gone. You wrap it in linen and offer it to him. He stares. Then, grinning, toothless on the left side, he says, keep it as a trophy. The next day, the treaty was signed without protest. The Pharaoh hosts a feast in honor of our brave friend and his mighty jaw. You're allowed to attend. Rare. The prince raises a goblet and toasts the holy molar plucker of Egypt. You take a small bow. The camel outside spits approvingly. Historians still argue over what truly settled the river treaty. Some claim it was the Pharaoh's generous grain gift, Others point to a shared fondness for olive paste. But a few scrolls mention something else. When the northern prince surrendered his pain to the southern hands, the waters still. A poetic way of saying, when the Hittites stopped being stubborn, peace got its foot in the door. One French scholar suggests the prince and the pharaoh bonded over shared dental trauma and may have exchanged mouthwash recipes. Highly unlikely, but you never know. You keep the molar, not to show off, but to remember, because sometimes diplomacy isn't gold or scrolls or goose dinners. Sometimes it's just knowing when to pull, gently but firmly, until the poison's out. You wake to drums, low, slow ones, the kind that don't announce festivals or weddings, but warnings. It's still dark outside, but the air is alive with murmurs and sharp-edged tension. You reach for your sandals with that familiar dread of someone who's had just enough good sleep to resent being dragged into a crisis. By the time you make it outside, you already know something is wrong. The sky confirms it. It glows red, blood red, a blood moon. It sits over Thebes like an angry eye, orange at the edges, deep crimson in the middle, hanging too close, too still, like it's watching your every step. You've seen eclipses before. This is different. People are crying. Mothers clutch their children. One old man is chanting and walking backwards in a circle, which might be a local spell or just his normal way of coping. You start making your way to the palace. By the time you arrive, the gates are swarming with priests, guards, and the kind of advisors who only show up when something needs urgently blaming. And wouldn't you know it? They're looking at you. The high astronomer is furious. He points at the sky, then points at you. Who else, he demands, handles the most sacred part of the pharaoh's body, the mouth, the channel of divine breath? You try to say something clever like, technically I just clean his molars, but the guards step forward and you decide now's not the time for nuance. Apparently, someone's been combing through old temple scrolls and found an obscure phrase. When the mouth of the king is misused, the heavens will burn red with divine warning. Of course, this could mean many things: a bad speech, a blasphemous curse, or the pharaoh trying to sing. But to them, it means you. You're placed on trial. A ritual one. Not quite court, not quite drama. You're brought to the Temple of Thoth, seated in a stone chair with a crocodile skull on the backrest, cozy, and told to defend your dental soul. The lead priest stands. He's wearing a mask shaped like a falcon's beak. Very serious. Tell us, he intones, how many mouths you have offended. You blink. None? A gasp from the crowd. Then a skinny scribe shouts, "But what about the mummy?" Everyone turns. The mummy banquet is still fresh gossip. You hear whispers of gum oil, afterlife chewing, and unholy molar whispering. You want to explain that the ritual was authorized, ceremonial, and supervised by a dozen onion-scented priests. But someone brings out the tooth, your trophy, the one the Hittite prince gave you. It's presented in a tiny gold box like damning evidence. The falcon priest squints at it. "Foreign tooth?" he asks. You nod slowly. "It was given to me." "For what purpose?" "Because I pulled it." Another gasp. Then the priest turns dramatically to the audience. "Friends of Ma'at, you see how this man collects mouths?" A baby starts crying in the back. Historians still argue whether blood moons were considered divine curses or celestial resets. Some say they were omens of war. Others suggest they signaled rebirth, change, or major dental hygiene overhauls. But there is one odd fringe theory. found in the footnote of a tomb wall in Luxor, that hints at a mythical figure known as he who polishes bone and balances breath. It might refer to a dental figure, or it might refer to a bird god. But today, the priests decide it refers to you. They bring out a jackal effigy, carved wood, painted black, placed on a reed mat before your chair. They tell you to confess to it. You ask, confess what? They just repeat the phrase, louder. Eventually, you lean down and whisper to the effigy, I use mint. A hush falls over the room. Then the high priest nods solemnly. He has confessed. Your sentence? Cleansing. Not exile, not death. Fortunately for you. Just a week of ritual cleansing at the edge of the Nile, under supervision. They strip you of your royal tunic. No tools, no scrolls, just a jar of sand, a fishbone comb, and a priest named Khafu who watches everything you do and sings the same 2 verses of a hymn. Constantly, for 7 days. You're allowed to eat papyrus soup and meditate on what you've done, which, in your case, was apparently be too good at tooth care during celestial weather. On the 5th day, something odd happens. A group of commoners show up. They come in silence, 4 of them, each holding a small clay jar. One by one, they kneel before you and whisper, my jaw aches. It spreads. By the 6th day, there's a line. By the 7th, you've cleaned 12 mouths using a comb, some river mint, and the flat edge of a fish scale. Khafu watches in confusion. Then join the line. His teeth are awful. When the cleansing ends, you return to the palace. The Pharaoh greets you with a smirk and a fresh set of robes. He doesn't mention the trial, but when you turn to go, he calls out, oh, by the way, you pause. He tosses something at you. It's a small stone amulet, shaped like a mouth with wings. You're officially the keeper of breath and bone, he says. Try not to offend the sky again. That night, the moon returned to normal, white, distant, quiet. You sit on your roof, amulet in hand, wondering how much more blame one person's career can carry. Then you hear soft footsteps. It's a young boy, maybe 12. My uncle's tooth is turning green, he says nervously. You sigh. Stand. Grab your pouch. Work never ends. Not even after sky trials. Especially not for the Pharaoh's royal toothpicker. There's something in the air. No, not sandalwood. Not incense. Not the faint but eternal tang of Nile mud and roasted duck. It's mint. Mint everywhere. Mint in the guard's breath. Mint floating down from the scribe's tower. Mint soaked into a princess's neck scarf. Even the crocodile in the moat burps minty bubbles. And you, royal toothpicker, humble servant of molars and fangs, you are to blame. It started with a simple idea. A little mint paste, a sprinkle of crushed barley, a dash of myrrh to impress the nostrils. You'd used it to help the Pharaoh's breath before a diplomatic feast with some Libyan envoys known for their harshly judgmental noses. He liked it. Really liked it. Smells like victory, he'd said, grinning through foamed teeth. The next morning he mentioned it to the High Chamberlain. By sunset, half the palace was rubbing mint on their gums like perfume. You were asked to demonstrate. Again. And again. You gave a short lecture in the kitchens using a boiled goat skull. Then again in the scribe's atrium with 3 volunteers, 2 of whom had shockingly loose front teeth. A week later, there were clay tablets flying around with titles like 10 Steps to a Divine Mouth and Freshness of the Phoenix, Herbal Breaths in the Afterlife. One afternoon, you're walking down the garden path when a young noblewoman stops you. She's holding a lotus flower in one hand and a toothbrush made from a twig in the other. "I've been using your mint blend," she says sweetly, "but now my tongue tastes like, how do I say this? Hot dust." You smile politely. "You're overusing it. Mint's power. Twice a day is plenty." She raises an eyebrow. "But Pahari says to do it every hour." "Pahari?" She points across the courtyard. There stands a man in far too many rings, holding up a scroll and grinning at a crowd of servants. Your scroll, or rather your recipe, copied, altered, and now claimed by someone else. Pahari is a minor priest from the temple district, known for excellent robes, questionable ointments, and now for stealing your mint formula. "I call it the temple tongue blessing," he says to his admirers. "Cleanses the soul through the breath." You approach. He greets you with an exaggerated bow. "Ah, the original mixer. How lovely to meet you." You frown. "That formula isn't yours." He shrugs. "All knowledge comes from Thoth. Surely you don't claim monopoly on the divine. You want to grab the nearest fig and throw it at him, but that's not very professional. Instead, you say, 'Careful. If you overload the myrrh, you'll crack someone's tooth.'" He laughs. "Then they'll need your services, won't they?" Touché. Historians still argue whether ancient dental concoctions were truly effective or just spicy distractions from chronic decay. Some suggest the mint blends helped prevent bacterial growth. Others think the Egyptians simply enjoyed tingling their mouths into submission. One fringe papyrus claims that certain priests believed breath was directly tied to spiritual judgment in the afterlife. If your breath smelled rotten, your soul might be tossed to the devourer faster than you could say Anubis. Oddly poetic, and possibly true. But back to Pahari. You retreat, but the gossip doesn't. Soon, strange rumors start circulating. That your mint blend contains crushed emeralds. That you cast spells on tongues to keep people from lying. That you clean the Pharaoh's teeth with snake venom to harden his enamel. One courtier asks if it's safe to swallow your paste. Another wants to smear it on his sandals for aromatic walking. It gets worse. One morning, the queen's cousin faints after a sniff of Pahari's enhanced version. Turns out he added poppy resin and crushed garlic to a mint recipe. You're summoned to inspect the poor nobleman's tongue. It's purple, not naturally. You recommend ginger water and silence. That night, the Pharaoh calls you to his private chamber. He's seated on a cushion, holding a mirror and peering at his own gums. "I heard about the poppy incident," he says. You nod. He puts the mirror down. "Tell me, can mint make me immortal?" You smile. "Only your breath, Majesty, not your bones." He chuckles. Then, more serious, "Do you want me to punish him? Pahari?" You consider it. "No," you say finally. "Let the mouths decide." And that's how you invent the great gum trial. It's held 3 days later in the palace courtyard. 2 volunteers, 2 recipes, 1 winner. You prepare your classic blend: mint, barley ash, crushed myrrh, honey to soothe. Pahari shows up with a scroll and a miniature shrine to Thoth. His blend has basil and cinnamon, and something suspiciously sparkling. The crowd gathers, scribes, servants, a few goats. The Pharaoh leans on a cushion, smiling like he's at the races. Both contestants gargle, both spit. Judges sniff, swirl, gasp, blink. Then the verdict. Your breath wins. By a nose. Pahari leaves the palace in a silent huff. His shrine tips over and a cat promptly pees on it. You don't gloat much, but the next morning a tablet appears outside your door. To the Pharaoh's tooth wizard, long may your breath inspire poets. Signed by the Queen's aunt, you spend the week restocking your mint supplies, drying leaves, grinding roots, carving tiny wooden boxes for paste. You invent a gentler version for children, using pomegranate rind and cinnamon bark. You call it Little Croc Smile. It has become popular. One of the guards commissions a batch to rub on his sword hilt. For luck, he says. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. And if it smells nice, why not? As the fad cools, so does the jealousy. People move on to new obsessions, painted sandals, linen folding competitions, a philosopher who believes birds dream in hieroglyphs. You're nearly asleep, lying on a cool mat, drifting between dreams of honey cakes and perfectly aligned bicuspids, when the knock comes. Sharp, urgent. 3 beats, pause, then 2 more. That's not a normal knock. That's the wake up it's strange and sacred knock. You groan. Outside your door stands a breathless temple runner, smeared in ash and flower pollen, holding a scroll. Urgent summons, he whispers, from the temple of Ptah. Why whisper, you ask? He leans in. It's about a god's tooth. You blink. What? By sunrise, you're inside the temple's inner sanctum. Candles flicker on every surface. There's the thick scent of date resin, old stone, and something metallic, like wet bronze. A circle of priests in leopard skin shawls stands around a statue of Ptah, god of craftsmen, creation, and sacred geometry. He's carved from dark stone, seated with eternal calm and a staff of power across his lap. The high priest steps forward. Honored tooth worker, he says, bowing. The god is in discomfort. You look at the unmoving statue. With all due respect, how do you know that? He raises a wax tablet. His jaw vibrated during morning chants. You take a breath. Count to 5. Did it fall? No, it has buzzed. Buzzed, of course. Historians still argue whether temples fabricated such divine interventions to keep the public reverent, or whether priests truly believed their statues could feel and speak. Some suspect elaborate string pulley systems. Others point to natural earthquakes or underground echoes. One fringe theory even suggests that temple caretakers placed copper wires in statue bases to hum under certain heat conditions. But that doesn't matter now, because you've been asked to fix a god's molar, and you don't exactly have a rule book for that. The priests bring tools, well, their version: obsidian knives, ceremonial combs, a jar of blessed Nile salt, and a feather from a heron that once nested in the temple ceiling. You politely push them aside and take out your own pouch. Copper scraper, smooth bone probe, fresh mint resin. Do you even know where his tooth is? A younger priest asks. You walk slowly around the statue, scanning its face, head, and chest. Then you find it. On the left cheek, a small crack. Hard to notice, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. Right through where the statue's mouth is slightly parted. A trickle of dried red dye seeps from the edge. You turn back to the priests. This isn't a divine signal, you say. This is paint. Someone tried to stain it to look like blood. Gasps all around. You look closer. It's crushed hibiscus. The high priest looks stunned, then furious. An emergency investigation follows, while you carefully clean and patch the crack with powdered pumice and beeswax. The temple acolytes are interrogated one by one. Finally, a boy confesses. He snuck in after dark and painted the stain, hoping to create a miracle and bring more worshippers. His family runs the incense stall just outside the temple. You don't blame him, really. In a city where divine attention equals grain rations and social climbing, even statues get stage makeup. But now, the story spreads. The god Ptah had a toothache, and the toothpicker healed him. People begin arriving with petitions for you to bless their mouths. One elderly farmer shows up with a cow skull and says, "It moves like it's in pain. Please bless her teeth." A basket weaver offers you a chicken in exchange for spirit gum protection. You smile and accept the chicken. You name it Papyrus. Then comes the strange part. The temples double down. If gods can have toothaches, they reason, then surely they need tooth care. Statues are polished. Mouths are brushed with ritual sand. You are invited to supervise oral ceremonies in 3 temples by the end of the week. One includes a full chorus humming while you gently scrape lime buildup from the open mouth of a statue of Hathor. During the ceremony, a bat flies into the temple and hits the wall. Everyone gasps. They take it as a divine sign. You take it as a bad aim. Still, you're now officially divine dentifex of the Pantheon. Your name is added to the temple registry between beetle breeder of the sun beetles and supervisor of scented oil for royal knees. Prestigious. At night, you start having strange dreams. You're floating above a field of limestone teeth and they're all humming. Not a melody, more like a vibration, like the statue. You wake up sweaty and clutching your probe. The next day, a priest gifts you a carved amulet shaped like a molar with wings. Protection, he says, from speaking stones. You don't ask what that means, you just wear it. One afternoon, you return to the Temple of Ptah to check the repair. The statue is quiet. Still, the crack is sealed. You press your hand against its stone shoulder, cool, solid. Then, faintly, you feel something, a vibration, like a purr. You step back, say nothing. Maybe it's the sun warming the stone. Maybe the priests were right. Maybe gods do have molars. And maybe yours just earned a little of their trust. You walk back through Thebes as the sun sets. In your pouch, a feather, a new recipe for divine mouth balm, and a small carving someone left beside your door, a smiling crocodile holding a toothbrush. You smile. The divine and the ordinary have never felt so close. And tomorrow, you'll see what Ra's high priest wants. Apparently, the sun has developed morning breath. Of course it has. You're elbow deep in a hippo's jawbone. Don't ask. When the noise begins, not drums, not horns, not even angry shouting. It's whistling. Hundreds of people whistling through their teeth in slow moaning harmony. You lift your head, confused. Even the hippo looks mildly disturbed. A palace runner sprints up the corridor, sweat flying. "Emergency," he pants. "Chewers are revolting." You blink. Like, revolting? "Not yet," he wheezes. "But their teeth are." Out in the rear courtyard, beneath a sizzling sun, a crowd of palace laborers has gathered. Gardeners, painters, brick carriers, linen beaters. They wear their work robes inside out. Each carries a stick, not a spear, a chewing stick. And in unison they chant, "We want mint, we want balm, no more rotting gums for my palm." A man steps forward. He's big, broad, missing several teeth. "I am Bacon," he announces, mouth of the masses. Oh no. Turns out the workers have had enough. They've seen the nobles sipping ginger rinse, applying fragrant resins, and chewing cinnamon bark like it's divine licorice, and they want in. I scrape bricks with my tongue, Bacon growls, while the Queen's lapdog has a toothbrush. He holds up a splintery stick. We chew twigs from acacia trees. Tastes like dirt. Sometimes it is dirt. A woman behind him yells, "My cousin swallowed a beetle." You try not to smile. "Oh, let me guess," you say. "You want free dental service for all?" There's a pause, then cheers. Also, Bacon adds, cherry-flavored chew sticks. Of course, historians still argue whether dental equality ever truly existed in ancient Egypt. While nobles had access to resins, rinses, and occasional tooth care, evidence shows that many commoners suffered badly worn enamel, thanks to grit in their bread and lack of dental tools. One fringe theory suggests some pharaohs did sponsor public toothwashing festivals, but no records survive, only murals of people smiling with suspiciously perfect teeth. Regardless, you now stand at the center of what may be the world's first dental rights movement. The crowd has sharp sticks. You walk among them, inspect their teeth, cracked, blackened, gaps like riverbanks in a drought. You ask them what they eat. Bread, dates, more bread, porridge, dust. You suggest chewing flax seeds to scrub their molars. They nod thoughtfully. One woman whispers, "Can I just have what the vizier gets?" You glance at the palace balcony, where the vizier sips tea through golden teeth. Fair point. Back inside, you pitch the idea to the court. "What if," you say, "we made simple chew sticks for the workers?" The High Chamberlain laughs so hard he snorts lotus wine. The treasurer coughs. "What do we look like? A chew stick dispensary?" But the Pharaoh listens. He's lounging, watching his pet monkey inspect a mango, when he raises one eyebrow. "What would it cost?" You calculate. Acacia bark, licorice root, a touch of mint, some copper for carving simple kits. Far less than a bread riot, you say. He chuckles. "Do it." And just like that, you're running Egypt's first public dental campaign. You call it the Chewer's Joy. Scribes love the name. You get a storage room in the West Wing, a pot of copper, 2 apprentices, and a deadline. 1 week. You start experimenting. The first chew stick splinters too easily. The second tastes like old sandals. The third makes one of your apprentices sneeze for 10 straight minutes. Eventually, you find a blend. Licorice root soaked in mint water, with the tips crushed to make soft bristles. You wrap them in linen dyed with onion peel, yellow for strength. The people love them. One man weeps as he chews. It tastes like morning in a garden, poetic and mildly concerning. Distribution day arrives. You hand out bundles from a raised platform flanked by guards. The workers line up for hours, smiling, chewing, laughing. A woman hugs you. "My son can sleep without crying now." Another asks if you can make her husband chew less. "He talks too much." You promise to look into it. Bacon, the mouth of the masses, raises his new stick like a scepter. "You are now," he says, "friend of the gums." You nod solemnly. "I accept." But not everyone is pleased. A nobleman complains that the servants smell too fresh. One priest claims the new chew sticks disrupt divine resonance in the kitchen. The vizier himself sends you a message. Kindness is good, but don't let the dog sit at the table. You ignore him. Instead, you expand. Start placing chew bundles at river crossings and city gates at granaries. You carve little instructions onto them. Chew daily. Spit kindly. Soon, children recite it like a rhyme. And someone writes a song. Minty mouth, happy house. Sweet breath ends every row. It has become popular. Too popular. 3 weeks later, a minor noble commissions a gold-plated version of your chew stick. Then the vizier hosts a chew banquet, where guests arrive chewing, dine chewing, and leave chewing. You watch in disbelief as someone dips their stick in honeyed wine and declares it the future of luxury. Another trend hijacked. But you don't care, because back in the workyards, the workers are still smiling. They leave bundles at the feet of temple statues. They teach their children to rub gums after meals. And once you catch Bacon singing to his chewing stick like it's a baby. That night, you sleep with the windows open. And somewhere out there in the dark, 1,000 mouths chew in harmony. Thank you. The first sign something's wrong is the silence, not the peaceful kind. The tense weight of 1,000 sphinxes kind. The palace, usually humming with sandals, birdsong, gossip, and mango vendors yelling about bruised fruit, is eerily still. You round a corner and almost collide with a runner. He gasps, "He needs you, now." You blink. Who? He just stares and whispers, "The Pharaoh." You're led straight to the royal chamber. Torches burn low, casting long shadows across the ornate columns. Musicians stand frozen, their flutes at their lips. A scribe faints as you pass. Inside, the Pharaoh lies reclined on an embroidered couch, head tilted, one hand dramatically pressed to his jaw. A single tear rolls down his cheek. You hurry forward, brushing off protocol. What happened? The High Chamberlain wrings his hands. He ate a date. You ate. And a pit it lodged. The Pharaoh groans. You suppress a smile. Tooth pain wasn't a joke in ancient times. Even minor dental trauma could spiral into infections, jaw damage, or in rare cases, death. Historians agree. Ancient Egyptian diets, packed with gritty bread and dried fruits, were notoriously rough on teeth. And pharaohs, despite their luxuries, were not exempt. Fringe theories even suggest that certain pharaohs were buried with full dental kits, not for show, but because their spirits might still suffer molar trouble in the afterlife. And now you're staring into the mouth of Egypt's divine ruler, where a date pit has caused national alarm. You've made it. You're the apex of tooth-based emergency response. The Pharaoh gestures weakly. Left, back, pain. You lean in. There it is, a small, jagged date pit, wedged precisely between the last molar and the gum line. There's swelling, redness, possibly a splinter. You reach for your probe. Hold, the vizier says. Shouldn't we consult the stars first? You sigh. If the stars say no, do we leave the pit in? He grumbles but steps back. You brace your hand, gently insert the copper tool. There's resistance, then pop. The pit comes free. The Pharaoh exhales so deeply the flame of the nearest torch flickers. Then he passes out. The room explodes into action. Attendants rush forward with clothes and oils. A priest sprinkles sacred herbs in the air. A scribe shouts, "Document the pit!" And 2 guards race off to find a painter. You cradle the object in your palm. It's small, cracked, sticky with blood. You feel like you've just retrieved a lost amulet from the underworld. The High Chamberlain turns to you. What now? You blink. He rests. But rest is a foreign concept now, because they want answers. And most dangerously, they want symbols. By morning, the royal date pit had become a national relic. It's placed in a carved ivory box. Priests declare it an omen of balance. The Pharaoh endured pain for the people. The pit is paraded through Thebes. You're asked to walk beside it. You refuse, politely. That night, someone leaves you a scroll. Tooth puller of kings, be careful of the power you pluck. You frame it. 3 days later, the Pharaoh summons you again, but this time it's not for pain, it's for wisdom. Tell me, he says, reclining comfortably now, how many others live with this ache? You pause. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. He nods. And they do not cry out? You shrug. Some do. Most just chew on one side. He laughs, then grows quiet. I think I know why my father always frowned. You say nothing. Sometimes the most royal pain is the invisible kind. Word spreads that the Pharaoh suffered and survived a divine molar test. Poets write verses, he who chewed the stone and kept the crown. Children play a game called date pit duel, where they try to wedge seeds between their own teeth. Schools ban it immediately. Even your apprentices get carried away. One tries to grind date pits into a salve. It smells like regret. Then comes the troubling part. The vizier calls a meeting, urgent. The people, he says, are throwing out their dates. Why? You ask. He throws a scroll on the table. It reads, if it could hurt the god king, what might it do to me? You rub your forehead. So now Egypt is afraid of fruit. A new decree is drafted. All dates must be pitted before sale. A minor bureaucrat suggests royal chewing licenses. The nobles suggest hiring you full-time to inspect every meal. You decline. Instead, you visit the markets. Speak to vendors. Suggest soaking dates, carving small warnings into bread loaves. You become the unlikeliest food safety officer in the Nile Valley. The Pharaoh calls you one last time. He offers you land, gold, a private garden shaped like a molar. You bow low. I just want to keep people chewing, you say. He laughs and gives you something better. A tiny statuette of himself, smiling, with a date pit in one hand and a chew stick in the other. You place it by your bed, so every night you remember you once saved a kingdom by plucking a seed. It all starts with sandalwood, not the sweet kind used in incense. No, this batch smells wrong, too sharp, too sticky, like someone tried to bottle envy and forgot to screw the lid on tight. You first notice it when one of the queen's attendants faints mid-tooth rinse. He was gargling, humming, then thud, right into a fruit platter. You're called in. Check his mouth, the High Chamberlain says. You oblige. Slight swelling, faint discoloration, gums tinged blue, which, unless he moonlights as a river deity, is not normal. You sniff the rinse bowl. Sandalwood, but off. Too off. Something's going on, and it smells like treason. You start asking questions, casually at first, like, so, what's in the Queen's mouthwash these days? Or, where does the royal tooth powder come from? Hypothetically. You poke around the hygiene stores. Rows of neatly labeled jars, crushed mint, soot ash, salt from distant quarries. Then you find it, a jar marked royal grade sandalwood paste. Except it's cheap. You've smelled real sandalwood. This is imposter wood, probably scrap soaked in oil mixed with chalk and maybe a whisper of disappointment. You confront the keeper of pastes. He sweats instantly. I only store it, he squeaks. But the guilt is oozing like overripe figs. Turns out someone's been replacing the good stuff, selling the real sandalwood paste on the black market, replacing it with fake blend and pocketing the difference. For months. Worse, It's not just the queen's rinse, the pharaoh's balm, the priesthood's sacred tongue spread, even the vizier's personal polishing powder, all swapped with subpar mix. You follow the trail, and it leads straight to the vizier's cousin, because of course it does. Historians still debate how widespread corruption was in ancient court life. While Egypt's bureaucracy was famously sophisticated, filled with scrolls, tallies, and seals, humans will always be humans, especially where powders and profit meet. One French scholar even claims entire perfume factories were fronts for illegal hygiene goods. Whether that's true or not, you now hold a scroll detailing the theft of the kingdom's finest mouthpaste, and its connection to the man second only to Pharaoh. It's dicey territory, which is precisely why you write a poem. It's short, elegant, just cryptic enough. Wood once smooth is ground for gain. Let not false fragrance rule the rain. You slip it beneath the Pharaoh's breakfast tray. He reads it, chuckles, then frowns, then calls for a council. The hearing is quiet, no shouting, just cold stares and rustling papyrus. The vizier's cousin denies everything. You present a jar of the fake paste. Let the court smell it. One noble gag. Then the real blow, a list of transactions, seals forged, payments hidden. The Pharaoh's eyes narrow. He speaks just one sentence. Teeth don't lie. The cousin is removed. Quietly, no fanfare. Whispers follow. He's reassigned to count crocodiles near the southern border. In August. Afterward, the Pharaoh summons you privately. Good nose, he says. You bow. Then he adds, would you take the robe? The robe of the vizier, the second most powerful position in Egypt. A robe embroidered with stars, a scroll of the office, a chair with footrests shaped like lions. You stammer. You sweat. You decline. Gently. I prefer plaque to politics. He laughs so hard he nearly swallows a whole date, then nods. Wise choice. You both chew in silence. From that day on, things shift. Guards nod a little deeper when you pass. Scribes leave you extra scrolls. A chef sends you mango slices carved into molars. Even the crocodile pond attendants start calling you my lord of enamel. One day, someone paints your face on a temple wall. You're kneeling beside a giant tooth, offering flowers. A child stares at it and says, that's the man who made chewing safe. Your apprentice corrects them. No, that's the man who smelled a lie. You continue your work, quietly, refining tooth oils, teaching nobles how to floss with reeds, inventing a tongue scraper made from ostrich feathers and shame. People ask why you didn't take the power. You tell them, because you can't fix your breath with a throne. Sometimes you still get letters from people across the Nile. Can you send mint bark? My husband thinks beeswax works help. My aunt swears by onions. Is she cursed? You answer everyone. You don't have to. But now you're not just a servant. You're a whisper, a proverb, a reminder that clean mouths and clean power are often linked. Then one night, you're invited to a royal play, a comedy. It's about a man who finds a cursed chew stick and accidentally becomes Pharaoh. You groan as soon as you read the title. Still, you attend. Front row. The play is ridiculous. There's a talking tooth. A chorus line of dancers dressed like molars. One character clearly represents you. They named him Brush Two. He spends half the play chasing squirrels who stole his mint. Everyone laughs, even you. Because somehow, even in parody, your story is being told, and that means something. As the moon rises, you walk home. The streets are quiet. The air is thick with the scent of oil lamps and warm stone. You stop by the river, the same spot where years ago you dropped a reed and decided to pick it up, a choice so small it barely rippled the water. And yet here you are, not vizier, not king, but something stranger, something steadier, the molar that never wobbles, the breath between gulps, the man who noticed a smell and changed a kingdom. It happens quietly. One morning, you simply don't rise. The sun peeks over the palms, birds trill in the courtyard, and a breeze flutters through the open lattice, carrying the scent of baked barley and wet limestone. Everything is exactly as it was, except you. You're lying on your reed mat, arms folded, mouth closed, tools beside you. Still, the apprentice who finds you doesn't cry at first. He just sits by your side, waiting for the silence to end. Eventually, he lights your favorite myrrh and places a sliver of mint on your tongue. You once told him, "Leave me with something fresh." He obeys. Word travels like a lightning jackal. Before noon, half the palace knows. By sundown, the other half has decided you are either a saint, a sorcerer, or the secret twin of Thoth. The Pharaoh weeps, openly. The queen commissions a hymn in your honor. The high chamberlain breaks into your quarters to make sure your tongue scrapers aren't made of cursed bronze. They're not. Scribes declare a week of public hygiene mourning. No one knows what that means, so they improvise. All of Thebes shuts its mouth. Literally, no loud talking, no arguing, not even public chewing. You, the quietest man in the kingdom, are honored with the quietest mourning. Your apprentices hold a ceremony where they floss the temple cat's teeth. No one stops them, because no one wants your ghost sneaking mint oil into their ears at night. Then the Pharaoh makes a decision, a big one. You will be buried in the Valley of Craftsmen, an elite stretch of tombs for royal builders, artisans, and scribes, normally reserved for those who built pyramids or inscribed the Book of the Dead. But you kept Egypt's mouths open and its leaders alive. Let him rest among those who shaped gods from stone, the Pharaoh says, for he shaped kings from jawbone. It's a great line. He writes it on your tomb wall himself. Construction begins the next morning, not on a simple tomb, but a shrine, 3 chambers, carved stairways, a ceiling painted with molars and moon phases. Your sarcophagus lid is shaped like your face, smiling, eyes closed, a brush tucked behind one ear. Beside you, they place a gold-plated toothpick, your original chew stick, a scroll of patient names, over 2,000 entries, 1 date pit, just in case. And then there's the mural. Oh, the mural. It's massive, 15 meters wide. At its center, you, dressed in royal linens, brushing the teeth of Ra himself. The sun god grins broadly, light pouring from his molars. To the side, Thoth writes, "Excellent technique." Anubis holds up a mirror. The crocodile-headed god Sobek gives a cautious thumbs up. Historians still argue whether this mural was satire, worship, or an inside joke between you and the artist. Fringe theorists believe it means you ascended to dental godhood. A few children start leaving reeds at your tomb as offerings, just in case. The day of your funeral, crowds line the streets. Not for a warrior, not for a prophet, but for a man with copper tools and good posture. Priests chant a blessing adapted just for you. May your tongue stay sweet, your breath ever mild, and your smile shines on in the jaws of the Nile. You're placed in the tomb, wrapped in fine linen. A final rinse of pomegranate water is poured at the threshold. The Pharaoh himself sets a carved stone at the entrance. On it, a single word: clean. Your apprentices weep, not because you're gone, but because they now have to handle everything. One tries to invent a new rinse using cinnamon and goat milk. It's a disaster. Another insists that your ghost visited her in a dream and demanded the use of copper tweezers instead of probes. That one sticks. The tweezer method is all the rage. In 50 years, it's taught across 3 cities. They call it the Picker's Grip. You'd have hated the name. A new pharaoh rises, then another. Each one visits your tomb. Each one leaves a gift. Some leave scrolls. Others leave tooth-stained date stones. One, famously paranoid, carves your likeness onto his own toothbrush. He dies believing your spirit protected his molars. Maybe it did. Centuries pass. Sand drifts in. Your name fades, then returns in a scroll found under a pile of decayed reeds. Archaeologists squint, debate. Was he a priest? A physician? Why does this mural show him flossing Horace? No one agrees. They argue for decades. Some call you the first dentist. Others think you were a misunderstood prophet. One scholar insists your tools were ceremonial. A different one swears they still smell like mint. And yet, every time a new tomb is opened and a chew stick is found, someone remembers you. Every time a child plucks a reed and chews it without knowing why, that's you. Every mint seller who boasts about breath-freshening properties, you. And in the quietest part of the museum, behind thick glass, sits a tiny gold toothpick. Slightly curved, still sharp, labeled only, belong to the royal toothpicker, found near the temple of Ra's molars. People walk by, curious, confused. Some pause longer. Those are your people, the ones who understand that sometimes history isn't made by war or worship. Sometimes it's made one tooth at a time. Now close your eyes and drift a little deeper. The night is still and all is quiet, just like the city when you passed. A hush that says he mattered. You're walking slowly now, not on sand or stone, but on polished limestone warmed by sun and memory. On either side of you, the statues smile, not the stiff, frozen grins of carved royalty, but the gentle, familiar smirks of people who once winced and laughed beneath your copper tools. There's the Pharaoh, sucking in his breath during a cleaning. There's a young apprentice, stuttering while explaining a new rinse recipe. Even Ra himself leans down from his chariot in the sky, giving you a wink as you pass. The scent of sandalwood and mint curls around you, light and clean like a promise. A breeze carries the sound of tiny brushes on stone. Someone in the temple is keeping the mural dust free. And somewhere beyond, a soft hum. Not bees, not wind. Maybe just memory. You rest now in the deepest chamber of silence. No more aching jaws to soothe. No more scrolls to unroll. No more date pits to extract. Only stillness. And the knowledge that somewhere, someone is chewing a little easier, smiling a little wider, because you once cared. So let that thought carry you. Let it drift over you like linen. You are the breath between laughs, the hand that steadied pain, the quiet keeper of kings. Sleep well, royal toothpicker. You've done enough. You can rest now.